not have this up. Let's put this back up. Boom, there it is. There we go. Eric's already starting. Eric is already starting. We're seeing it. What's going on, everybody? Hello, welcome to Dungeoneer's Pack Live. I am Josh. Thank you guys for tuning in. Dungeoneer's Pack Live is a weekly live stream where I and sometimes guests, and this week I have guests again, talk about D&D topics for 5th edition to provide insight and solutions for problems at your table. Joining me this week, I have a returning champion, Jordan from Flute Salute 3 times. Let's go. Thank you for coming in again, man.
Good to be here again. Hopefully no one's sick of me and I'm still welcome in the group.
Yeah. Always. And for the first time, and I've been trying to get Wintry Wyvern and collab with you for the longest time. I'm finally happy to have you on here. Wintry Wyvern.
Happy to be here.
Yes, yeah. Awesome. So we're gonna jump into it. We have a lot to cover today. We're covering Tal'Dorei Reborn, the first 5 subclasses. There's a lot going on, especially with Call of the Netherdeep. Around the corner, I believe. What, a week or two away?
Yeah, March 15th.
Yeah, it is. It is coming up, and for folks that are wanting to jump into the setting, Tal'Dorei Reborn is actually probably a perfect book. It really reminds me a lot of exploring Eberron. In the same way, if you wanted to jump into Eberron and have subclasses that are tuned into the setting and really dive in and feel a part of the setting, they give you some really awesome options. I'm seeing people in the chat. What's going on? Eric, as always, thank you always for the love.
What's up, Eric?
Coming in with the $2 dono. Hit the like button if for Josh. He will cry. Yes, I will. What's going on? I see Cleric Corner here. Phil Kearney, Rich. What's going on, guys? All right. As always, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll go ahead and answer them. We're going to get started. We're going to start off with the Juggernaut, the Barbarian. And let me pull it up. I have everything marked for people. You guys will see it right here on the side on the screen. Unfortunately, my guests won't be able to, but people in the chat will. So, first question that I have here for you guys. What do you guys think is the defining feature of the Juggernaut? Or what exactly is the path of the Juggernaut to you guys first?
To me, the path of the Juggernaut is for characters who are like undaunted, unmovable, and they say, no, you move, that sort of thing, you know, to quote Steve Rogers, Captain America, from one of his famous comic book lines. And then to me, they're all about like forced movement and not being able to be moved. And they also set up some of their allies with some interesting abilities. And there's some interesting synergies between some of their abilities that I don't think are obvious that I hope we can talk about. But that's how I see it, as like undaunted, and especially people that are like oppressed and like rising up against oppression based on the description of the Juggernaut. I think that fits really well.
And what about you, Viv?
I think when I look at this subclass, I see kind of the phrase like unstoppable force moves meets immovable object. The first couple features are definitely like, you will not move me, I will move you. And then the more you level up, it's like, okay, now I'm moving. It's time to go, and you're gonna move with me. There's a lot of focus on movement, which I love as someone who really enjoys like grappling barbarians. This is definitely something that piqued my interest once I started reading it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the same thing I noticed, and it would actually change my mind on it. Like, behind the scenes, I had mentioned to Jordan, this wasn't really my favorite subclass when it first showed up in the original Tal'Dorei book. And after sitting down and reading it, it's still not necessarily my first go-to pick, but the ability to manipulate opponent's movement is actually really solid. But I have some reservations still on it. So before we jump into really that, for you guys, what is the defining features for this? I know you guys already mentioned the movement, but what are on top of that, what keys you into why people should be excited for this subclass?
Wintry, you want to go first this time?
Yeah, for something like this, I'm looking at Thunderous Blows. I think forced movement is something that martial classes don't really get too often. If you're looking for like early forced movement from Thunderous Blows, like specifically at the 3rd level range, you're looking at like Telekinetic, you're looking at Crusher. Those are like mostly feats, but not necessarily built into the base class. This is an opportunity to reposition enemies in a place that's more favorable, which is fantastic. And like I really like how in the third level ability, like you can already move huge creatures, which is something that you don't really get access to unless you have like what Giant's Might from New Night Fighter. That's the only way you can really move
Yeah.
huge creatures otherwise. So just having that power right from the get go is one of the more interesting things, and how to play with that movement and combine that with other things is probably the most dynamic thing about this class.
I agree. And I like that Thunderous Blows is not limited to once per turn or anything like that, like the Crusher feat is, right? And it would actually go really well with the Crusher feat because you could do 2 attacks to move someone back, and then you could, well, let's say you're using, I don't think anything, is there a polearm that does bludgeoning? So, yeah, like hypothetically, if you used a quarterstaff with the polearm master feat, you could do 3 attacks, knock them back 15 feet, and then later 30 feet because it upgrades as you level up. I always like that too. And the Crusher feat would be another, what is it, 5 or 10 feet? I forget.
Yeah,
But
another 5.
you can really knock people around, and that includes as reactions for opportunity attacks. But though there are some other abilities here, like the Hurricane Strike, that might tempt you with your reaction instead. There's a lot of fun you can have with this, especially when you start thinking about like the Sentinel feat and those sorts of things.
Yeah, because I was looking at this, I was wondering like, does this stack with Crusher? Because immediately I saw this, I'm like, oh, put Crusher on top of this for a Marshal. It's like at least early on, you're moving people 10 feet and then eventually 15 feet per hit, or at least 15 feet on the first hit, and then teaming this up with a Warlock, and they get the upgrade to the Eldritch Blast to continue pushing. So you're just isolating one creature out into the middle of nowhere. You know?
Yeah, knock them off a cliff, knock them into Cloud Kill, Cloud of Daggers, whatever your friends like to use. You put them in the right spot.
Yeah, and if Stephen Harris brings up a good thing, I'm gonna pull this up, for you guys. He brings up it keeps a fun visual in combat because you constantly have to close gap.
Yeah, it's like you're pushing someone as you're fighting them, which like looks really cool as you do so.
Very Dragon Ball Z. And speaking of which, the Resolute Stance, where you can at the beginning of your turn make a defensive stance, which is basically like a free dodge action, but with the downside of you have disadvantage on your attacks. That's kind of like Dragon Ball Z, like someone punching you and like nothing happens. Sort of, it kind of feels like that to me. But with that, I noticed something with Resolute Stance, how you can just freely at the beginning of your turn say, "I'm doing this Resolute Stance. Everyone has disadvantage to hit me, but I'm less effective attacking." You can still do reckless attack.
Exactly. Yeah.
You cancel that out, and then you get regular attacks. And then now that you've had advantage and disadvantage to you cancel out, no one can get advantage on you. So it's like you're an 18th level rogue with elusive with this combination.
Yeah, you're basically attacking as normal like a fighter, but now you also have the benefit of dodge, no action economy required. And the thing about Resolute Stance is that there's no requirement to stay still. You can move around with Resolute Stance. The visual is that you're like holding your ground, but you can go wherever you want. Something that I really like about this is that well, this combined with Thunderous Blows, if you combine it with like what Polearm Master Sentinel, you can start pushing people around, and as they approach, you can stop them from getting too close. So you keep people who have only melee range away the entire time. Or you could push somebody with Thunderous Blows and then just back off and not get opportunity attacked. Movement options like moving enemies is really really fun to play around with, and this Resolute Stance gives you gives everybody else disadvantage on hitting you, which makes you very very tanky.
Yeah. And I think for me, like the big standout feature, and then my criticism of this though is Hurricane Strike. It's probably the most dynamic and more cinematic feature they have in this subclass, because it gives you the payoff for pushing enemies away, and you get to close in the gap, and then you just get to pound on them, and then if you push them into an ally, they get to pound on them also, which are like it just felt very super heroic. And then, but my big thing is, okay, we have the setup with, I'm pulling it up right now so you guys see, with Thunderous Blows, but we have to wait till level 10, and the average gaming experience, this is where you're finishing off your campaign. It's like you don't get to use this a lot unless you're one of the lucky few that get past level 10, level 13, up in the 20 range.
Yes.
So it's like I would have loved this even if they nerfed it just a little bit and bring this up to level 6. And that,
So one of my biggest gripes about Barbarian is that level 7 to 9 are very, very boring. It's like you get like a feat, advantage on initiative, and like that's about like brutal critical, I guess. Like it's not very
Yeah.
exciting. So 6 is fun, 3 is fun, 6 is usually fun, but climbing up to 10 is a slog. And usually around that point, barbarians like multiclassing into rogue, multiclassing into fighter. So this Hurricane Strike, even if you do get to it, like what is the payoff? What is the goal here?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's nice. It's a cool ability, and I like the visual. My question is on Hurricane Strike. Like you see that second paragraph. Additionally, when you push a creature into a space within 5 feet, is that tied to your reaction? Is that like it, or is that like just a passive that you get?
Separate.
Yeah, it's separate.
So yeah, so that's just you always get that. So if you have a rogue in the party who uses melee attacks, they're gonna love you because you're securing that reaction attack
Yeah.
for them to get sneak attack out of turn.
I love the visual where you're just like pushing them through your allies, and they're just getting swipes as they pass by.
Yeah.
Uh, like you could like pinball somebody to one ally, then pinball them to another with the second strike.
Yep.
Which is really goofy to me. But I
Yeah.
like it.
My only criticisms. All right, go for it, Jordan. Before I start hating.
So speaking of level 6, like we do still get the fun Resolute Stance at level 6. It's just not as thematic and like visual as Hurricane Strike. But Demolishing Might is also pretty cool, I think, because you deal an extra D8 with any of your attacks to constructs, which
Yeah.
I don't know of any other abilities that just flat out give you more than once per turn or something like that, like additional damage to a creature type. So that's really cool. And you deal damage double to objects and structures. So you're the one knocking down doors and taking out like defensive turrets and those sorts of places, or someone's cover. You just smash it instead of moving around it. Like I think that's really cool.
I have a feeling like that deals damage to objects and structures is just like a little nod to Critical Role because they always have issues with doors.
Yeah, the doors.
Yeah.
I thought this.
Okay. Okay, but so someone give the Juggernaut an adamantine weapon, and every time you hit an object, it's a critical hit. And then with this, you double damage out the object, so it's like a quadruple damage swing.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be pretty great.
Yeah.
Because Demolishing Might isn't explicitly a crit; it's strictly double
Right.
damage.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Double damage. Yeah. So Hurricane Strike like was my big thing. Is like, oh, just move this up to 6, and like, you get the feel goods. Especially since, like Wiv, you said, like the 7 and 8 range, you're not really doing too much as a barbarian. I think just moving that up, and even moving Resolute Stance maybe back one would still accomplish what you're trying to do. My other concerns are just in general with this subclass that why I wasn't completely sold is Resolute Stance and then Spirit of the Mountain. They just make you they kind of there's 2 clauses in both of them that make me feel really win more because and then with Spirit of the Mountain you can't be knocked prone, right?
Mhm.
Move to the log of the ground. But you're
Raging.
but you're a barbarian. Your rage, your advantage on strength checks. You're not really going to be losing to like getting knocked prone. Period.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, okay, you're just kind of ignoring a thing you're already really good at. And then
Mhm.
Resolute Stance is the same thing. You can't be grappled. Well, you're a barbarian. you're
Exactly.
raging. You're really good at grapple checks. You're not really going to get.
You kind
Well,
of
there are other ways to
grapple
get
you,
knocked
you know?
prone, though. There's some spells, and there's even more abilities being added. Like the game becomes more and more like 4E, and there's more ways to knock you prone or force your movement. But also, if you jump from a height, you usually would like fall prone unless you do like an acrobatics or something. But you can't be knocked prone. And also, if you have flight for some reason, you can't be knocked out of the air while raging because you can't be knocked prone. So if anything would do that to you, that would really help. So if you're like an Owlin or an Aarakocra, a fairy, while you're raging, you just can't be knocked out of the air.
See,
With
Wait,
Spirit
that's
of the
kind of neat. Hold up, wait.
actually, that gives me a good idea. Like,
That's kinda spinning out.
I would have loved to see them because like for me it's like, okay, these are cool, but like you're an average like what you're going to see the barbarian doing. You already do this stuff, but with those other scenarios, I would have loved to see because this would have fit with it some sort of jumping movement where you're just like
Mhm.
hopping in and just bum rushing somebody and you leap into it, and then since you jump so high or something, that's when these effects cause it, and it gives you a little bit more dynamic.
Very Diablo 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Go
I
ahead.
got a thought here. When you fall, or you're always knocked prone, is that a thing? Let me see.
Not always.
Like
It's
if you
like
hit the ground.
it's I think there was a variant rule added that allows you to do like an acrobatics or something, but I think generally the assumption should be that you'll be knocked prone if you jump too high and you come back, or not just jump, but if you fall.
So I checked the falling rules of Sanithars. It says, at the end of a fall, you take 1d6 bludgeoning damage every 10 feet you fell to a maximum of 20d6. You also land prone unless you somehow avoid taking damage from the fall. So whenever you fall, you always land prone. Looking at Thunderous Blows, you can push a creature up to 5 feet away from you in any direction of your choice, and at 10th level, it becomes 10 feet. So what if you just hit somebody, Thunderous Blows knock them up, they fall down, take 1d6 damage, immediately knock prone, and then you can just hit them normally.
Yes.
Can you just keep knocking them up like a Street Fighter character?
Yeah, I was about to say,
if you can fly, if you can fly, you could even like chase them up in the air and keep knocking them up in the air as you go, or something like that.
Oh, just take the, I think it's a fighting adept, or it's the fighting style feat from Tasha's. Get your unarmed fighting style and just go to town.
Just punch them in the air.
Yeah.
I used to
really
theory craft this with the Aarakocra and the Way of the Open Hand Monk, and that's why it came to my mind is like punching someone up in the air as you go. This seems a lot easier.
Oh, sure, you can, people, man. That's ridiculous.
And look, the Hurricane Strike is like the aerial follow-up, the arrow ray from like Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Just like, reaction, leap after them and keep going. Oh, it's so funny.
I think you guys just sold me on this now because I'm a big fighting game fan. So I was like,
I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, just uppercut.
But you gotta wait till level 10 before they start taking fall damage. So
yeah,
should be interesting.
And what about
you don't want to sleep on level 14 Unstoppable too, because it reminds me of how the Berserker gets like immunity to Charm and Frightened or something, but this one I like better because it says you're immune to speed reduction, which doesn't happen that often, but that's cool. But you also become immune while raging to fright, paralysis, prone, and stun. And if you are already any of those things that would prevent you from entering your rage, you can still enter your rage anyway as a bonus action, and so it like suspends those conditions for the duration of the rage. Which reminds me a lot of the Ursa hero from Dota 2, how they added it. He can activate his ultimate even when he's stunned, which is really strong. So I love this sort of thing, especially because barbarians are very susceptible at these high levels to magic.
Yeah.
And this won't stop all magic, but this sure helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I really actually like this subclass capstone just because it encapsulates what I think of, like, if you're going to put something as Juggernaut. And this class very feels like if you're playing X-Men's Juggernaut or Colossus, like, combined. Like,
yep.
Just these two beefy, hulking characters, and you're just not stopping. Nothing's going to stop you, which I think that really encapsulates it.
And I think it's been a while since we've had like just a simply non-magical leaning barbarian. Like we've had a wild magic barbarian, we've had a beast barbarian, which has these like transformations attached to it. Like it's like this, something like this is more like the early berserker. It's more like what's that one that nobody plays? The battle rager.
Oh yeah.
More like those like non-magical barbarians that are just brute force, pure strength, swing and hit.
Yeah, and I would probably recommend this to people that want to play more of a thematically stripped down barbarian and don't really want to get into the berserker. I think if you have access to Tal'Dorei Reborn and you want just a barbarian that just wants to hit stuff, Juggernaut's probably the way to go. Like you don't have to. You just do stuff. Like you do what you're supposed to do as a barbarian to get in the fight and hit, and you're just moving things because you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
All right, and last question for this one, so we can get on to the next one. I'm looking at the time. What role should players expect to fill if they're choosing the Juggernaut?
Probably a frontliner, right?
Yeah, frontliner for sure. I mean, typical barbarian in that way. But you have a lot of teamwork synergies for anyone who creates any sort of area of effect where you want an enemy to be there, and you synergize with your fellow martial classes. Yeah. So I think it's perfect.
It's also a good team player in that, like, if there's a melee enemy attached to one of your ranged attackers, you can like bump them away. It's kind of like a defender, like a linesman football kind of player.
Yeah, exactly. You protect the quarterback, your wizard, your cleric, whoever's dropping spells or using a crossbow from the back. You say, "Nah, get back over here."
Yeah, and I agree that it plays in a fun space. Phil brought it up in the chat. that they're adding. This one added options to marshals without actually giving you an actual action to do it. They just tacked on part of your action, which is awesome. I'm on top of what Wiv said. I 100% agree. This is a frontliner that with the supportive features that's very, very team oriented, and which you don't necessarily see too much with barbarians as a whole. I think the Spirit Barbarian, Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, is the only one that really has team oriented features because it's mitigating damage.
Yeah.
And this one, though, I think with Juggernaut does require a player that is very aware of how spacing and movement works in the game. So you kind of do have to have some level of understanding of how 5th edition mechanics really work. Especially to take advantage of it, knowing where walls are at, where ledges are at, where your enemies or allies are at, to kind of push people into certain directions. Because you can actually save people. You save allies that are your squishy sorcerer wizard that unfortunately you're in a bad position. You can just run up and punch the guy out of the way. Yep.
Yeah, really dig it.
Yeah, not the most entry level in its strengths, but boy, is it cool for those who understand the game.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I'm a little bit more sold on it now. I don't straight out hate it like I did in the first go around. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna never play this. All right, next up, we got the Bard. And Wiv, you're very familiar with this. You have a video on this, and if you guys haven't checked out his coverage on this, I definitely go recommend it. So if you want to start us off on this one.
Yes, I love this bard. I really like. I've played. The only character I've ever gotten to level 20 was a bard, but this would convince me to play the bard again. College of Tragedy is basically a bard that revels in sorrow and like bad tragic stories, and then kind of flipping the script and turning them into more of a luck of fortune, like kind of twisting fortune, passing it on to your allies, and inflicting it on your enemies. And the biggest strength of this, before we go into the features, is that the story kind of writes itself. If you watch how these play out, you can see the scenes playing out in your head exactly how they would happen, and you can. It's very easy to make a narrative around this sort of character. It's very intentionally designed to do so. But the features are fun, so we should get into them.
Yeah. For you guys, which are the features that really stand out that players are going to be interacting with or should have fun with?
I love the poetry and misery, where when your allies or yourself roll a 1, you get a bardic inspiration back, which is also interesting because depending on your DM, you might do a lot of skill checks out of combat, or even your whole party might do like a group skill check. And if even just one person rolls a 1, you get bardic inspiration back. And it actually incentivizes your group to try to make things that result in rolls that are kind of harmless so that you can get bardic inspiration back. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's the only bard class that actually has any sort of bardic inspiration recovery feature, and it's very, very limited to how bad your table is going to roll in the game at a night.
But you know what? Sorrowful Fate really could be strong because you can change a saving throw using your bardic inspiration to a charisma save. So all of a sudden, that barbarian who always succeeds at not getting knocked prone or something like that, maybe they don't this time because it's a charisma save. That might be a minor use of it. But if you need to target someone with like hold person and they have a really good wisdom save, but maybe their charisma's not so hot, you deal psychic damage and make it a charisma save, and they need to say something poetic and dramatic if they die. So
it's been a while since I've seen like a full on paragraph about people doing something truly just flavorful. It's like when they're dropped to 0, they have to say darkly poetic final words. It seems like kind of a meme feature, but it's something that can play out in a funny way if it ever happens.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Let your DM put on that RP hat that sometimes they, especially when it comes to combat, they kind of, depending on the group they kind of just roll with the punches and it just becomes a combat simulator. Like, okay, this guy dies next thing. It's like a nice little reminder. Oh, hey, you can still role play in combat just a little bit.
Yes.
What really stuck out to me for the features, and actually like this can easily be reflavored. A lot of the features in this subclass, they deal with chance, probability, or manipulating it to some extent, or benefiting off of it. Poetry Emotions, the other one, or the first one. you recover your bardic inspiration if allies or you roll a 1. Then we have Tale of Hubris, where you increase the crit range against an enemy. So from 18 to 20, and then at level
in a response to them scoring a critical hit. So
Yeah.
again, it's like, oh, you scored a crit, but we're gonna get you back. You know?
Yeah, and then Impending Misfortune is very similar to the War Domain Cleric's Channel Divinity, where you can just add a +10 to an attack roll saving throw, but then you also take a penalty later.
Yeah, the -10 comes back to bite you.
Yeah.
So what would this was kind of like the most the grayest thing I found in this subclass that needed a little bit of clarification.
Mhm.
So there's no cost to using Impending Misfortune. There's no action economy to it. You just choose to do it. It
Yes.
also doesn't say you have to be conscious. So technically you could use these on your death saving throws. If you really needed a success on your last one, you could use that +10. Just make sure you don't drop it again, or you'll be bumped down to -10 on your next death save. It's definitely like a little bit of a caveat there.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of these in general, these features are triggered abilities. So they only are activated whenever a certain game state happens. So again, Impending Misfortune, you don't use an action, any of your action economy. It only matters if when you make an attack roll or saving throw. So yeah, you can use it on your death saving throw.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And then the last
What I
feature.
also like about Impending Misfortune is if you time it right, you really might not get the -10 because when you rest next, it goes away. Or if you do something kind of unimpactful, like you just make an attack and when you have a turn that like doesn't matter, you can get the -10 like out of the way in a time where it's not really going to hurt you. So
Yeah.
Again, like a pretty experienced player, someone who's creative in how they're using this resource, like the downside is almost nothing if you time it right.
Yeah. And the last feature has a possibility of just straight out killing an ally.
This has got to be one of my favorite capstones I've ever read because it's so you could see it. Like you could see this play out. The bard basically chooses who's going to be the protagonist of the fight, right? +4 to AC, advantage on attack rolls and saving throws, +1 d10 radiant damage on all attacks. Oh, no, they don't get the +1 d10. It gets dealt to them if they're hit. Oh wait, let me see. When the creature hits a target, no, they get the +1 d10.
Yeah.
The downside is that they will drop to 0 once the effect ends, and they get hit as a crit on any rolls against them that is 18 to 20. So they get crit 3 times as much. So they're going to take damage really quick whenever they get hit. The +4 AC prevents a lot of that. But what I loved about this feature was that it ties back into Tale of Hubris at 6th level. When a creature gets hit, when a creature gets a critical hit against your ally, you can spend a Bardic Inspiration and then re-trigger a critical hit on an enemy, which gives the same debuff to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's just a chain of critical hits that you could keep going. Battle becomes very fast, very intense. Big numbers are rolled. Somebody eventually dies. No matter what, somebody's going to die at the end of this fight. It just matters on who. So when we play D&D for these big moments, for these exciting, memorable moments that we tell everybody about, this sets it up perfectly. And that's what I love so much about it.
You can set up one of your allies to be like a crit battery. Like you're going to get crit so that our paladin can then wail on the person who hurt you. Sorry, man.
Exactly that. Yeah.
It's also interesting that I think most people would picture this being used at like the beginning of combat. But what if you used it on someone who's like down to like 10 hit points on your team and they're probably going to get taken out anyway? And you say, if you get dropped to 0 hit points, you only lost 10. So here's +4 AC, advantage on saves, extra damage, and just see how far that 10 hit points can take you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then actually, Phil just brings up a good point with when it comes to crit fishing, where you can kind of manipulate it. Barbarians obviously benefit from this, and paladins. And then you also have the champion fighter. They're all kind of crit fishing geared builds that you can build with all those. But Phil has a concern with it. It allows it for a little too readily. So that might be just a word of caution for folks, for DMs that are looking at this and wanting to allow it at the table. But also in general, I know optimizers and number crunchers have pulled this out that crit fishing and general builds are not as strong when you build them that way. So it's really table dependent when it comes down to it. Crit fishing builds are fun. They're just not necessarily powerful if they've done most of the time. So.
And the optimal target for this isn't always the fighter. It isn't always the person at the front lines. Sometimes you really want that +4 AC and advantage on saving throws on like your cleric or your support or like somebody whose goal is to keep everybody else up. Like if you can guarantee the cleric stays up for a minute, that's a huge boon to your party. So it's not always the sword swinger who gets the buff. It could be you too. Like if you want to give your tragedy bard their heroic moment, like after living a life of tragedy, that can happen too, you know?
Not to mention, you get magical secrets. If you grab Death Ward and you give Death Ward to whoever you're going to use this on, then they drop to 1 hit point instead of 0.
Yeah. My only negatives for this class, and this is going to be a playstyle thing for folks when you're comparing this to other bard subclasses. This one doesn't have a permanent active bardic inspiration dump ability. All the official ones do. Sorrowful Fate allows you to use your bardic inspiration, but it's only going to be once per I believe long rest. But it's strong and makes sense why it's only a once per use ability. So, and then since all the other features are based off active states, off of triggered states of the game, you're outside of, I believe, it's the Nimbus of Pathos is the only one that actually uses your action economy. You really have to be paying attention to what's going on in combat, what's going on around you to really make sure you take advantage of this. And unlike other bard subclasses, you're really going to be relying on your bard kit to do a lot of the heavy lifting of what you're wanting to do in the game, compared to all the other ones where you can spend your bardic inspiration to like Swords Bard, fuel one of your flourishes. Then there's also the want to say Glamour, where you can reposition your team or your teammates on the battlefield and just constantly just dump your bardic inspiration. It's designed very differently, but still flavorful. Like it fits within the bard. It's just gonna play different from what people are accustomed to. And this isn't something. It's not something I have not seen with Matt Mercer. I believe his Maestro Bard 2 it was played very, very different compared to other bards at the time. So it's just something to keep in mind is just you're not going to be, if you're not paying attention and not really realizing the game state and figuring out what other players are doing, you might not actually realize you're not playing your toolkit. So
that was one note I have. I have an article about all these subclasses, and I gave the College of Tragedy a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5 because a lot of its abilities are a little bit circumstantial, even though like when you look at them as a whole, like they're almost certainly going to come up. But you got to be really aware of like your party composition and how likely it is that you're going to get use out of these. However, I actually like that this doesn't give you like some other use for your bardic inspiration that just keeps getting used, because part of me is like, I don't have a ton of bardic inspiration, and the way that the basic bardic inspiration is pretty good, and I'd like to see it used. And so I kind of like that this doesn't create a fatigue of that, because people always talk about like monks always needing more ki, and I'm always like, why don't people talk about bards needing more bardic inspiration? Because more and more subclasses, they always come out with some new way to use it, but the base way to use it always seemed pretty good to me. And I've never really played a bard. It's probably one of my least played classes, so I'm not like super experienced, but that's just my impression of it.
I will say once you do, you're gonna love it. It was one of the classes I'm just like, nah, I'm not gonna play this. It's just not up my alley. And then I played a swords bard because I like Gish characters in general. And bard's awesome. Like it has a lot going for it.
I can vouch, really enjoyed bard. I was surprised. You'd think you want to be like a blaster, like a wizard or something, but bards like I feel like they just naturally lead into like role play and teaming up with their allies and support and all that cool stuff. And that's just right down my alley. Really enjoyed it.
Last thing before we move on, I wanted to bring up what Stephen Harris said, and it's the same inclination I had when I saw this. Was College of Tragedy is mechanically very luck based. I would love to see it used to make a bard who had tryst with the goddess of luck. And yeah, like this is perfectly able to be reflavored as a luck bard. And
absolutely,
and even with the you would just probably need to just change something on Sorrowful Fate when you use it, the poetic final words. This is something a little other flavorful, but other than that, like, yeah, you can use the kit as is and you're a luck bard instead, and it works. All right, we're gonna move into the next one. Looking at the time, we still got 3 more. Blood Domain. This is one that was originally featured in the first Tal'Dorei campaign book, and they brought it back. I'm not sure what the differences are, but how do you guys feel about this one? Which features made you stand out to you?
I mean, just from the jump, before going into the rest of the features, I think that the main spell list is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Hold person, haste, slow, blight, dominate person, hold monster. Those are just great spells. I mean, they're just really, really good. Kind of paints a picture of what you expect this blood cleric to be able to do. But just right from the jump, just with this spell list, it's a good subclass. I don't need to read more quite yet.
Yeah.
And even sleep, like when you're level 1, sleep can be amazing. And so getting that on a cleric is great. And false life allows you to kind of mitigate the later features where you take damage to activate them. And so I think the spell list is top notch.
Yeah, in general, yeah, the spell list is really, really solid. And it all, like, you get your control features, what you would expect out of anybody that can kind of bend blood, manipulate blood, but then you get stuff like false life, stone skin, and then haste and slow that play into a very specific play style, which I want to go into. Your bonus proficiencies, you get proficiency with martial weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get stuff. Let's see, some of the channel divinities, or no, stuff like divine strike. Let me pull up my notes because that'll inform you more because I have them all written right here. I see this as being very much a martial melee spellcaster gish kind of subclass. Your expanded spell list, like I mentioned, divine strike, and then the capstone vascular corruption aura. You want to be in the fight. You want to be in the middle of everything. And I'll pull this up because this just straight up damages people around you for a minute. Hostile creatures come in here, they're taking 3d6. So
and their healing is halved.
Yeah, but even though it's geared towards a specific playstyle, there's some very, very flashy features that it has that I think are more cinematic and exciting for players, but they don't necessarily go with that playstyle immediately. They're really, really great utility tools. Mainly, it's in the channel divinities. So, what'd you guys feel about Crimson Bond first, and then Blood Puppet?
Crimson Bond is cool if you need to spy on a creature. I think a lot of tables this will not get used very much, but players who are creative and really want to gain more information about a situation and be more cautious or investigate someone, I think it's a great feature. And I like that at the end, it specifies what actually occurs with the target if they fail or they pass their saving throw. It says they're unaware of it, what just happened, but they just get a feeling of unease. I wish more things like this specified that, because one of my biggest gripes is some spells, like especially enchantment spells, it doesn't say what happens. Like, does someone perceive they just made a wisdom save, or did their mind just kind of passively shake it off? You know, those sorts of things are important to me, so I really like that they included it. But as for the feature itself, it's nothing crazy, but when you do want to use it, you'll be glad you had it, especially at low levels where you don't have things like Arcane Eye and Scrying to just go spy on people.
Yeah, this is very similar to like wizard scouting with their familiars.
Yep.
The benefit is that it's 10 miles, which is great. I'm pretty sure the Hexblood from Van Richten's has a pretty similar feature where you can watch through the eyes of somebody else. Yeah, remote viewing on Hexblood. If you're within 10 miles of your token, which you give to somebody, then you can trance and see through it as an action. So that's kind of a more willing thing. This is theoretically a more unwilling thing, but you got to have their blood first. So if you're scouting someone you've never met, how exactly are you supposed to achieve that? You know, it's kind of a tricky thing like that. But you could use this on your allies. You know, if you want to send your rogue somewhere and you want to see through their eyes, this is one way to do it.
Yeah, and for me, I really like this one specifically because it opens up a playstyle for cleric that's not normally associated with it. Like, they're not normally the scout of the party. It's normally ranger, rogue, monk. or a wizard with a familiar, or a druid in animal form, right? So this opens up an interesting play style for the cleric, especially if you're playing in smaller parties where everybody kind of needs to spread out their toolkit a little bit. This
Yep.
this really helps out. It works. Blood Puppet though.
Can I say one quick more thing about Crimson
Oh.
Bond before we go to Blood Puppet? So Crimson Bond, it does last an hour. So if you're in a situation with an enemy, or you're in some kind of talk with someone that you're skeptical of, you can activate it then, and it lasts for an hour, and then within 10 miles you know where they are. And so it is a great way to just kind of put a mark on someone, sensing their blood and their life force. So it can be pretty cool, even if you don't need to use the blood and like use the con save for taking damage to yourself to make yourself see through their senses. It can be done in a cool way. But Blood Puppet, go ahead.
Yeah, this is very much Avatar: Last Airbender, full on.
Yeah.
Yes.
You get the ability to use your channel divinity to pretty much control a creature, their movements. Either they're large or smaller. They have to be up to 60 feet. They have to pass. If they fail the Wisdom saving throw, they become charmed by you. And pretty much, here's a list of things you can have them do. Let me see. Golf. Okay, so you can have them do one of the following: interact with an object, make a single attack, or just sit there and do nothing.
Okay, so because when we talk about this, we have to talk about the comparison. So this is very much like Dominate Person, which you get 3 levels later.
Yeah.
But the distinct thing about this is that the creature isn't specified. It doesn't have to be humanoid. It could be beast. It could be elemental. Could it be elemental? It has to have blood, right?
Yeah.
It could be anything with blood. Monstrosity, dragon, anything that bleeds it could be under your control at level 6. So that's the big advantage it has over other spells. This does require concentration, so you can't do 2 things at once. But this is something that comes online very early. And there's also something about controlling a corpse, which is crazy. Imagine you drop the big bad early, and then to clean up its mooks, you just magic the corpse and have it swing with whatever massive weapon it was using when it was alive. That looks fun.
Oh man!
And the thing is, like you said, it doesn't have to be a humanoid. It's just a corpse. So you could, that purple worm you just took out, Blood Puppet. So there's a lot of things you can do with
There's
it.
a size limit.
There's a size limit.
Oh, there's a size limit. Okay, I forgot. At the very end, it says huge or smaller. Okay, but yeah, still, there's a lot of big creatures you could reanimate. I forgot that. Thank you for reminding me. So, before I get carried away, and so, but also an unconscious creature. Like, so if there's someone that you use sleep on, which is on your domain spell list, you could make it so they don't even get to make a save. You just make them your Blood Puppet. And
unconscious, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, and so then, or if you find them asleep, those sorts of things. And then, but like you said, it's like Dominate Person, but it's actually more like Dominate Monster, which is what an 8th level spell, and you're getting it at level 6. And it's not as open with what you can do with it. Like, you can't make them cast their spells and stuff like that. It's just like you said,
but
object.
Hold on there.
Oh, go ahead.
It says make a single attack. That's spell attack rolls. That's melee weapon attack rolls. That's any attack rolls that they have on their sheet. So if they have like a necrotic bolt ability, that counts as an attack.
Yeah. Okay, so this actually gets buffed by the changes to monsters where they're not casting a spell. It's like their ability.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, so this is probably the most exciting feature the subclass gets. Like, it's one of those things where if you're a new player, you just try to use it on everybody. You might be disappointed, but if you're smart about it, I think it's defining.
Yeah, and for me, I agree with it. This is like the draw for the class. You see that and you're like, oh, I want to play that. I want to get to level 6 and use this feature. I don't care about anything else. That's the cool feature. And normally, in terms of just 5th edition design for subclasses, they try to put all those up at 3rd level or whenever you get your subclass, because it's mainly your bread and butter you're going to be using. Just the nature of clerics and channel divinity, and then they're just getting a lot at level 1, and this ability being so strong, it makes sense. I would not put it past those wanting to even have more balance to push this up even farther up the chain, just because it could be seen as I could see at tables be feeling too strong at certain
Yeah,
tables.
that's fair.
Yeah. So, and then what do we get? We get Sanguine Recall.
You get Arcane Recovery.
Yeah.
Do this.
Yeah.
6th level, you can get a
Yeah.
number of spell slots equal to half your total cleric level. Is that Arcane Recovery? I'm pretty sure that is, right?
I think that Arcane Recovery is exactly that. I think it's rounded up to, if I recall. This one gave me
Yeah.
pause for a second before I realized you can only do it once per long rest, because I was like, you could just give yourself temporary hit points somehow and just keep giving yourself more spell slots back. Like if you had on your team, you had a Twilight Cleric who was giving you temporary hit points every turn, you could get like all your spell slots back. So it's smart that they made it just once per long rest, even though you take the damage, because that would have been crazy.
Yeah, this is really good with, in general, players tables that play styles that they don't do short rests or anything. It's just they have that one big fight, they nuke and nova everything, and then it's long rest again. Or it's going to be for those. I see this feature is really geared towards this new play style that's not necessarily how the 5th edition was designed to have like multiple encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So, or actually, I can be thinking the complete opposite. Actually, never mind. I'm speaking out of turn. It's the complete opposite. This is for this play style where you have the short rest, and you're not actually using pretty much only have one big fight and having long rest. So
if you're a Nova style with long rests very often, you probably won't even care about Sanguine Recall.
Yeah,
but but where it's different from Arcane Recovery with the Wizard, like Wintry brought up, it's only an action, so you don't have to wait till your short rest to do it.
Yeah,
you can take the damage anytime as an action to get the spell slot back, which is a little bit more flexible. You just take the damage as a downside.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I think in the like more long rest centered games where it's just like, yep, one fight and one long rest. If you kind of below one of your high level or you're like 6th level or higher, okay, let me see. I'm level equal to or less than half your cleric level, and none of the slots can be higher than 6th level. So any of your like your 5th level and lower spells, and you kind of just blow them, and you need the spell slots in combat to kind of keep going. I think this is where you're going to see it in those kind of games. But in games where you're having multiple fights and days are longer, or you use short rests, this is going to be actually super useful for you to give you some longevity, which I like.
Yeah. And it's not the only feature you get at level 6, right? It also comes with Blood Puppet.
Yeah.
So
right, yes, it's not alone at level 6. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a 20th level cleric being like, all right, I need more spell slots. 10d8 damage.
Yeah.
And just like recover all of those spell slots.
Yeah. Other than that, final thoughts on the Blood Domain Cleric. How do you guys feel about it?
I felt good about it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. Like Wintry said, like its spell list alone is really good. I can just see a lot of players being disappointed with it if they think they can just go around using Blood Puppet on everybody, or if they try to use Bloodletting Focus and they're like, I use martial weapons and I get a bonus to spell damage, so I'm gonna run in all the time with inflict wounds, and then they just end up like getting dropped because they're a cleric, but they don't have heavy armor, and they still have the D8 hit dice, so they're not as tinky as some others, and so I think people might be disappointed. But I think if you're a little bit more experienced and you don't just run into situations, I think you can do a lot of fun with this. And I love the enchantment wizard, and so I love that this kind of has a bit of that to it.
And thoughts from you, Liv?
Yeah, it's good in that it's basically an enchantment cleric. I mean, as a fan of Avatar, I do love the idea of like a bloodbender in D&D. Yeah, I think the martial weapon thing right at the top will throw people a bit off because the feature right after it is specifically damage dealing spells. So you got to use like Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade for that. But I think the idea is that the martial weapons draw blood.
Yep.
And with that blood, you use it for 2nd level Crimson Bond. I think that's the intent. But it's, as you said, they don't get heavy armor. So they're not going to be as great as frontliners as you'd want them to be.
Yeah,
But
it's
otherwise,
It's even
good
more
game.
limited than that with Bloodletting Focus because it has to be a leveled spell, and so like a
Oh,
cantrip
shoot.
wouldn't gain it. So that's why I go to like Inflict Wounds is
yeah,
like you're
inflict
using a
wounds,
spell slot, you know.
and it makes sense. It's probably why they wanted they. For me, it's like as soon as I saw Divine Strike, and then you have the Martial, and then the Corruption, you're probably going to be mid to close range, bouncing kind of back and forth. But with Bloodletting Focus, I'm like, oh, they probably really want you to use Inflict Wounds. Like,
In fact, I'm looking up Inflict Wounds real quick, and yeah, its duration is instantaneous. I wanted to make sure it would actually work because that would have been like, what is this for then?
yeah, because it's very very specific. You have to deal damage at first level or higher, and the spell's duration has to be instantaneous. So it really points to a very very specific, very very specific feature, especially considering the other features in the class kind of putting you in the mid to close range.
Yeah, and I appreciate that they put in that detail. Like it has to be instantaneous duration because there's so many abilities in 5e that they just kind of left open ended, and people did all kinds of stuff with it that I don't know was intended. And so I appreciate that kind of attention to detail here.
Yeah, I think I noticed in general, um, they had people on this team that have worked with Wizards of the Coast before.
Yeah.
Like I think James Hake is Hake. How do you say that
Yes.
name? Is on this team. So like a lot of these are proofread to be like official classes. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of like nuance to the mechanical aspect of a lot of these. It's not perfect, it's still there's still things, but neither is Wizards of the Coast. Neither is D&D products,
Yeah.
Yeah.
as we know. So like it's much better than the homebrew that was made like 3-4 years ago in that the writing has very much been tightened up.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Phil was saying clerics can now exchange divine channeling for spell slots. Sanguine Recall should not use channeling as all. Oh yeah, and no, it does not use channel divinity. Just a clarification on Sanguine Recall. It's just both Blood Puppet, which uses channel divinity, and Sanguine Recall both come in at level 6. It's just Sanguine Recall has its own thing, and it's once per long rest. So, Drunken Yoda says, I'm gonna pull this up because it was funny. Is it me or does Tal'Dorei feel like it was made by an emo or goth? What?
I mean, do you know Matt Mercer?
Yeah.
They've been pretty open about their patronage to Hot Topic in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very much have a streak of goth and emo in the cast, and especially Matt.
They're the ones behind Blood Hunter.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is all par for the course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we got 2 more. I'm going to try to get through them as quick as possible. We got Moon Domain, and I believe with you've covered this one also.
Yes.
Okay, so you want to lead us off with here? What should folks expect with this one?
Yeah, Moon Domain is it focuses on the 2 moons of Exandria, Katha and Ruidus. One is basically one is good, one is evil, and you're kind of balancing between the 2. What is interesting about this one is that there's a lot of like illusory magic that is tied to the first moon, but then there's a lot of like lycanthropic energy tied to the second one. You'll get a lot of martial benefits on one side, and you'll get a lot of like illusion stuff benefits on the other side. So balancing those 2 is very interesting. And if you completely ignore the lore, this works perfectly well as an alternative moon cleric to the Twilight cleric that some people are unhappy with. Generally a good class as we get into the features.
Yeah, my impression of it was I think I know what it was trying to do, and I don't think it went far enough. I gave it a 3 out of 5, kind of like a middling subclass. Like it's not working against you, but I think it just could have gone a little further with some of the stuff it wanted to do. And that was my impression of it. I love that it gets the dream spell though. It's like one of my favorite spells.
Yeah. For me, I'm not completely sold on this one. I don't think it's bad. But when I see a title like Moon Domain, I want something that's a little more flexible in what I can do in its flavor. But as Viv, you pointed out, it's very tied. This is actually the subclass that's actually the most tied to the setting of the game. So I think maybe changing the name of the domain a little bit, or like a little caveat to let people know, because it doesn't necessarily draw, or at least from the features to me, doesn't draw on a lot of aspects of what people might expect out of the moon.
Yes.
So and that's very very
Good point.
different. So and it's one of the things it kind of reminds me of the moon situation in Eberron, where different moons actually represent different I believe dimensions. I'm forgetting the actual name of them, but there's a specific word for them in Eberron. And it kind of feels the same way with this. Is like you're drawing on the two moons of Exandria, and they're kind of like portals to different energies. So let's jump into we'll jump into the main features. Clarity of Katha is like the first one.
That's great. To use your reaction to give someone advantage on a wisdom save. Yeah. That's solid.
That'll be good for the rest of your life. Like the whole campaign, you're going to be using that.
Yeah.
It's pretty plain and simple. Just a good all around feature. Nothing flashy.
Yeah, and for me, it's like it was nothing flashy. It was just solid, mechanically just solid. You can use it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and it recovers on a long rest. This is one of those features that will excite in-franchise players because we just know how the game works.
Of course.
But for newer players, go for it.
It is notable that it's not one of those like you see the roll and then you use it sort of things. It's someone's about to make a wisdom save and you can give them advantage. And so it may be that they were going to roll good enough anyway. It's one of those.
Yeah. And then but for newer players or players that kind of just wanting to jump in or looking for something that's super exciting and flavorful, this is not the ability for it. It's just not. It's
mechanically sound.
Yeah.
Thematically kind of boring.
Yeah, it's just very, very flat mechanically. It's not something you're going to get excited about. But then we get the Channel Divinity where it plays in the duality of the two moons.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we get? For an hour, Blessing the Watchful Moon for an hour. When using this one, a creature speed increases by 10 feet, and they have advantage on perception and survival checks using a smell or made to track a creature, which is very Lycan. Very, very wolfy. And then you get Blood Drenched Moon for 10 minutes. A blessed creature has advantage on attack rolls against a target if at least one of the blessed allies is within 5 feet of the target and the ally isn't incapacitated. Very, again, this one's actually martial oriented or just combat oriented, I should say. Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel
good
about these?
It's it doesn't inspire me, but it is cool to give someone like good perception and survival plus speed, which is great for like dungeon delving because then you get a +5 to your passive perception as well. So that's useful. Good tracking. Blood Drenched Moon is basically pack tactics, which is a very good feature. And so, great. Just didn't excite me.
Put this on your marshal. Put Blood Drenched on your marshal. They have advantage all the time. When I read this, what interests me is that in terms of flavoring aspect, this is very lycanthropic. Like both of them, the first one is literally like a wolf. The second one is literally pack tactics. What I would love if DMs allow people to play this domain list is if the person blessed by the cleric takes on a more lycanthropic form. Like they physically change to reflect the abilities that they get. Like a bonus to speed could be more like a feral sort of gate or setup. And then the Blood Drenched Moon, you have these like this angry bloodlust that kind of takes over you. There's a very visual thing that I can see coming with this that ties specifically into that second evilish moon, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that pretty much this is like the feature. I'm like, if they're going to go moon and go this route, I can totally see them pick it in and going a more werewolf route. But I don't think but that thematically doesn't, I don't know if I feel that it goes 100% that way because then you see the expanded spell list. There's nothing feral or werewolfy at all. It's more of the light aspect of the moon at night. Yep. So like you have a a lot of conflicting ideas and just some of the features and then it kind of reminds me the Twilight Cleric where it has a name of something but doesn't necessarily do what the name says. Because Twilight a little random Twilight Cleric. Twilight Cleric is very much Night Cleric instead of the little time between night and day, and it just thematically just all over the place. And I kind of feel this is where the moon one's kind of going in that direction. You have this spell list that deals with the light of the moon, and then you have werewolf-like features.
Here's what I do like about it. At level 6, Channel Divinity, Mind of Two Moons. This is very innovative because as long as I've been playing 5e, people have been homebrewing stuff to get concentration on 2 spells. But they usually don't rein it in. They just say like concentration on any 2 spells. This takes that desire and at least reins it in to the domain spell list. You can concentrate on 2 of those at a time if you use this Channel Divinity. I like that. I suspect when I look at those spells, most of them don't have a lot of synergy together. But you could cast the same one twice with this.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the intent is to use Moonbeam at two at a time, which I just made a video and an article ranting about people using Moonbeam too much and not using it very well. So when I realized that, I was like, not into it. but I think it's very innovative and cool. It's just I think they should have given as part of that if Moonbeam was the intent. I mean, you can do other things, right? But it seems like 2 moonbeams was the main intent. I think it should have said, like, if you have 2 moonbeams, it does more damage or something like that. Just could have gone one step further and I would have been way into it. But I like the concept. I like their 5e awareness and how they designed it. But I don't love Moonbeam. So that's me.
You're bringing me with flashbacks to Warcraft. All I'm seeing is boomkins just dropping moonbeams on everybody. But yeah, it's relatively more balanced than what you've seen. I think the only time we've actually seen this feature in official 5th edition was in Ravnica and not Nicol Bolas, that's the other dragon. It is Niv Mizzet, excuse me. He has a feature, and he's a monster though. It's a monster stat. He can concentrate on 2 spells. No drawback, but he just concentrates on 2 spells. This is the first time you're seeing it in any sort of it's not official, but semi-official. This is how closely tied Critical Role is to D&D. In some way that players will have access to this, and on top of only being limited to your spell list, your domain spell list. Yeah. If you're concentrating on 2 spells, you have disadvantage on your con checks. So, outside of Warcaster, there's really no way to negate this, unless you just have a really good con. And you have con saves.
Yeah. So here are the combos that you could do with these spells. So double Hypnotic Pattern. You could put Hypnotic Pattern in 2 spots, and if everyone breaks free of 1 and you still want to kind of hold it on one person, you can cast it on another group of people, or just cast it on the same group twice. Really up to you. Moonbeam Invisibility is a combo. Invisibility only breaks when you cast a spell. So you could do Moonbeam and then Invisibility, and then just kind of chase somebody around with the Moonbeam, and they can't really find you to retaliate.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Greater Invisibility plus anything. Greater Invisibility is a great spell. Gives you advantage on everything, on all your attacks, and it can't be found. And you could just cast any of these spells, and it's really hard to break that concentration. You could also double Greater Invisibility to put it on 2 people. I believe you can cast it on other people, right? That's something you can do with this spell. So yeah. You could twin Greater Invisibility. It's a little bit slower, but it still works. Overall, really smart to rein it into just the domain spell list. Not busted, I don't think.
Yeah, good design, and like you just said, I'm glad there are other possibilities, that it's not just Moonbeam. So there's some cool stuff you can do.
All right, Cleric Corner has a question. All right, go for it. Go for it before we go into the question.
No, I'm just saying that even though it's bad, I would absolutely double Moonbeam, insult to injury kind of thing.
Send me a video when you do.
Those combos are wicked. Just now, I'm just thinking it's like, oh yeah, Moonbeam, Invisibility, just run around. Nobody's finding you anyway.
Yeah, there's just a Moonbeam chasing somebody. They're like, where is it coming from? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Cleric Corner real quick.
Cleric Corner said, want to know which of the 2 clerics would best fit in your current campaigns. So this is going to be more of a flavor thing. I don't know if you guys want to lead off with this one.
One of my favorites is Curse of Strahd that I did about a year ago, and both of these would work for that, in my opinion. But I also just finished Rime of the Frost Maiden, and in that one, I think the moon might be better. I'm not sure. And then I'm about to play Tomb of Annihilation, and I'm not really sure which one will fit better for those.
Not blood, I don't think. Oh, if you want to take over zombies, I think you'll be fine. I still have to think. Wiv, do you have an answer?
I'm running more of an elemental campaign right now. I don't think the blood cleric would thrive there. I'm just gonna be honest. Not many targets for blood. Moon Domain, I guess, would have no problems. It's not entirely thematic to what I'm running, but it's cool, and I'd be fine with it. And I think that's what matters.
Yeah.
I thematically wouldn't vibe too well.
For me, definitely the blood. I'm running a Descent to Avernus. If any of my players are playing the blood domain, it would fit perfectly with this sort of like very metal aesthetic that this campaign kind of has when you're in hell. And having a person that can just cut up devils and demons and get their blood and kind of control them actually kind of like fits it, where you're kind of like this overlord of hell. Especially if they kind of reskin it as like some sort of Mad Max warlord kind of character. Moon domain, this one needed a heavy reflavor to fit into the campaign that actually kind of makes sense, based off the nature of using this sort of spherical thing in the sky as your inspiration for power. There in Descent into Avernus, there is the companion, I believe that's what it's called. It was this giant spoilers. It's this giant almost like a second sun, second celestial body in the sky that actually is the reason why the city of El Toro gets pulled into hell in the first place. So you could be use the moon domain cleric and be from El Torel, and your power isn't actually moon, it's the companion itself. It's that representation of what it's supposed to be, this beacon of hope, and you're drawing the energy from that. But since there is dark aspects of it, that's when you can pull into the other side and start kind of dealing with the ramifications of it not being what you thought it would be. So I think that's how I'd be able to fit in a moon domain in that game. So hope that answers your questions, Riker. And thank you for jumping in. I know there's another question up top. We'll get to it towards the end because it kind of encapsulate everything. But anything else that stands out for the moon or the moon domain cleric for you guys?
Yeah. Just as a passing note, Capstone, Eclipse of Ill Omen, 60-foot radius, all saving throws are made with disadvantage. Just that alone is really fantastic. You really get this. The visual is that like the moon is hanging right above you, like hanging over, like very Legend of Zelda style. Everything is painted red. And just having that, even in endgame, disadvantage on saving throws is really good.
Yeah.
And you can cut out their ability to regain hit points, which is fantastic. So. Works really actually surprisingly well with Moonbeam, because if anyone's standing in the Moonbeam at the start of their turn, they can no longer regain hit points.
Mm-hmm. It's really big area, some really cool effects, and it does require concentration, but it says specifically it's compatible with the Mind of Two Moons channel divinity for concentrating on two things. So good design. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it too.
Yeah. Overall, my final thoughts on this class. It's gonna be fun. Like it's gonna be solid. If you can just kind of wrap your head around some of the thematics, maybe not always hitting the spot. Like I don't know if it's trying to do too much with the thematics and trying to incorporate all aspects of the moon, or that it's too tied to the critical roles versions of how the moons work in that setting. This is one of those subclasses that it's super easy, like super strong to get reflavored if you want to bring it into other settings. Yeah, just finding the right angle to bring it in is just going to be the issue, because it doesn't necessarily work with all moons in each setting. I believe in Eberron this works really well, just because the moons in that setting are very similar to how the two moons in Tal'Dorei are. So, but stuff like Ravnica and Strixhaven, you're gonna struggle just a little bit there.
Yeah.
All right. We're finally to the last one. We're actually on my favorite subclass in this whole book.
Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
Circle of the Blighted. Okay, so I just put out a character build for this. For those wanting to jump into Call of the Netherdeep, you can play as a goblin. If you want to take the goblin from Monsters of the Multiverse, for Mordecai is that new book. I use that to help create a build for this. This one excites me, but it also, I have criticisms of it too, because the big thing with this Blighted Druid, it empowers the Druid every aspect of its kit, but doesn't necessarily give it a focus. That's my big criticism. So the coolest feature, and it actually has a really good fun feature right at the beginning, is Defile the Ground. Right, you put this AoE area, and any enemy that's in there, if they take any damage from an attack or from a spell, whether it's from you or an ally, the first attack or damage they take, you deal an extra necrotic damage to them, which is a small buff. And then I believe does it hinder movement? I'm trying to remember.
It does.
Difficult terrain,
Difficult
even if
terrain.
it's water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Defile Ground is really good because it's 1d4 every time they get hit on a turn.
Yeah.
So it's your turn, your ally's turn, their turn. As long as they're taking damage, there's another 1d4 attached on top of it.
Yep.
And then at like 10th level, it grows to fireball size. So
Yep.
it's like, which you can move, by the way, as a bonus action. So you can move it around, you can chase people, they have difficult terrain. It's just, it's a very like, I don't know how to describe it, like a StarCraft style creature where you're just like moving it around. Zone control is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, and it does increase to a D6 when its size grows. The damage also goes to a D6 instead of a D4. Caveat: it affects your allies too. So if your allies are in it, they're gonna take extra damage too. So you gotta be careful. Yeah, it's any creature that takes damage within it.
The corrupted area is difficult terrain for creatures that are hostile. Yeah. So additionally, when a creature in the area, yeah. So this is where it changes. So they probably messed up because it or maybe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, since and Jordan, right, because it doesn't clarify that this statement following up is also attached to the corrupted area.
Yeah. So difficult terrain,
statement,
enemies only.
Yeah.
Allies, it seems like it's saying any creature in the area. For the damage part of it.
Now I'm curious if that's intentional or not.
Yeah, me
that's
too.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's just a little minor thing to keep in mind. It really probably isn't gonna. Just depends. And higher levels, I see this can be a bit of an issue, especially when your enemy creatures are getting like 2, 3, 4 attacks. So these little D4s are going to start to add up, and then especially start getting 10th level, right? They start becoming D6s and D8s, and that should just the guys that are in the front line, that might start to add up just a little too much. So things to keep in mind. Also, it'd be within reasonable for a DM to just be like, okay, this only affects enemies.
Yeah.
So, but things to keep in mind. Thank you for bringing that up because I didn't even catch that. It's like, oh,
yeah, that's a good point.
But what got me saying that this subclass doesn't necessarily have a focus compared to other druid subclasses, because then we start getting these other features. So we have an area control feature that plays into druid's natural ability to control areas, zone control. And then you get blighted shape that just boosts your animal shape, but since you don't get increased shapes like the moon druid, you're going to be using this to be like a thorny cat, a thorny bird.
Yeah.
Which is cool. You're going to have a slightly more survivability when you're going to be scouting, really, what you're going to be using this for.
Yeah.
Which
is going to be that three-eyed fish from the nuclear power plant in The Simpsons that always pops up.
Yeah.
You're just like this little mutated creature.
I mean, it'll take a while, but once you get flying wild shapes, your owl can have 180 dark vision. Kind of cool.
Nice.
Not amazing, not very situational.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll take it.
Okay, Stephen Harris brought up a point of something would defile the ground. Are you standing in an area of water? So, yeah.
That's a good question.
Here's a good question. No, you're not standing, so I think you're fine. That's like a puddle. Then you're kind of screwed. But then we get Call of the Shadow Seeds, which lets you summon a Groot off of somebody's pain. And if somebody, I believe it's an enemy that is standing in your defiled ground, gets hit, you can use your reaction to summon Groot. And
yep,
which is sweet. Like, I don't know, like it has a lot of features. I don't know if the reaction is the right call for this, because Blighted Sapling, Call of the Shadow Seed is easily, I could see this being a core class feature that triggers off your wild shape. So yeah, like if they just took Blighted Shape out and just said Blighted Sapling is your alternate cost for using wild shape, I would be fine. I'd be happy.
I would consider that a huge nerf, because right now, I think the way it's supposed to be, because you can only have one of these blighted saplings at a time, and later they're kind of supposed to blow up.
Yeah.
So if it was tied to your wild shape, you'd run out of them really fast. But if it's just your reaction, you can just keep churning them out.
Yeah, obviously, I think you just need to rebalance this so that they're not weak. But for me, it's like, okay, this gives it a direction. This gives it something that you're gonna want to do, and not just be a full on utility druid compared to other druid subclasses like Wildfire Druid, or you have your pet, right? Your little flaming up spirit pet that kind of teleports around and just does damage here and there. And then what is it? It is Stars Druid. I was like, it has to have a different name. Nope, Stars Druid. You turn all celestial and you're lasering everybody, so it gives you a direction of what your kind of direction you're wanting to do. And that's the only downside to this one. You don't really have a direction. You're just want to be a well-rounded druid. That I'll get into Foul Conjuration. That sends
wait.
Oh, go for
I
it.
have some other stuff to say about the Blighted Sapling. So
Okay.
it's notable that it has blind sight, 60 feet.
Oh, that's true.
So if it's like in a fog cloud or something, it's going to attack people with advantage and not sweat it.
Yeah.
And it's something you can just keep doing on your Defile Ground. So as long as you have reactions to use, you can just keep churning them out when people are taking damage. And as part of summoning them, they make an attack. So it's potentially adding 2d4 plus your proficiency bonus. So what's that? Like 5 at this level, it'd be about 8 damage that you just gain per round, potentially.
Plus
and so it's kind of cool.
1d4 on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Saplings trigger Defile Ground damage too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. Okay. So, and but that's the thing that threw me off too, is like, okay, you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus in, I believe, I don't know if you want to keep chucking these out though after every hit, because you're going to burn through that really quick.
I mean, why not? They have no expiration time.
That's
until
true.
your next long rest. It just lasts forever if you live the battle.
That is true.
If an enemy attacks them, that's awesome. And then with Foul Conjuration, it's even better if your enemies attack it, right? So
actually, this is the funny part. Foul Conjuration turns every summon, every sapling into little nukes, little necrotic bombs, which is hilarious.
Very Baneling.
Yeah.
Very Maokai of League of Legends.
Yeah. I believe Pack Tactics will probably love this one because he loves his summon animals. And you could turn a bunch of little squirrels into little D4 bombs, which is hilarious. Like, turn all your little saplings into little nukes. Obviously, the only caveat is like the enemies have to make a save. Let me just double check if it's a save or suck.
On save, and it's all or nothing, so it's not for half damage.
So it is a save or suck.
And if you do summon a bunch of squirrels, like you said, you can't just end conjure animals to make them go away and they all explode. They have to reach 0 hit points. And so when you unsummon, when they go away, they don't reach 0 hit points. They just go away, right?
Yeah.
And so they have to actually die.
That's when you just hit them with your own spell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
I thought it was interesting that it said it gives that little table of like how big they explode depending on what they are. And the no challenge rating took me a second, but I realized the Blighted Sapling doesn't have a challenge rating, so I think it's only meant to be make your Blighted Sapling explode extra big for that part of the table, which at upper levels it can explode for like a little mini fireball damage.
Yeah. So
this is also for summon elementals, summon beast, summon fae, things that like summon spells that were in Tasha's.
Yeah.
They have no challenge rating either.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I forgot they don't have challenge rating. Thank you for saying that. I was like, what are the other things that have no challenge rating?
Yeah, pretty much challenge rating for all these newer spells, it's going to be depending on your proficiency bonus. So there is a caveat right here with the Blighted Sapling. So proficiency bonus equal to your bonus right here, challenge. So it's scaling. So higher level ones are going to obviously do this. And then with your Blighted Sapling, the higher your proficiency bonus is, obviously the higher damage it's going to be able to do, which is great.
Yeah, by now it's like 4d8.
Yeah.
Right? Because your proficiency bonus is 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not to be ignored, the Blighted Resilience they also get as part of Foul Conjuration. Like if you're against a necromancer or something who was just going to siphon off the life of all your summons, they're immune to it. Like immune to necrotic and poison and the poison condition.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll come up all the time, but it'll be nice sometimes. Being immune is a big deal.
Yeah. It's very... You could tell towards the end of this, they were designing this to be like, okay, maybe we should do Summoner, right? You get
Yeah.
Call of Shadow Season and Foul Conjuration to kind of buff up your summon abilities as a druid, and then you get an AoE ability as Defile the Ground, and then you get a Wild Shape buff with Blighted Shape. I would not mind if they would have just got rid of Blighted Shape and added some sort of minor buff to summoning that would have just actually wrapped this whole kit up completely. The Defile Ground I like 100%. It's just a really good control spot. But not that Blighted Shape is bad. It's actually really good too. It's just
it just seems a little bit like a ribbon, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at everything as a whole, I love the direction it went. It's just getting this to maybe change to just more of a summoner toolkit would make perfect sense and would tie this up really nicely. But
what would be crazy with this subclass is when you get to level 14 with Incarnation of Corruption. First of all, you get necrotic resistance and +2 AC. That's great. But again, your Defile Ground area grows.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the damage grows to 1d8. And your Blighted Sapling gains multi-attack. The main thing that I think is interesting there is how much damage Defile Ground can do at this point. If you have any number of followers, which when I played in Out of the Abyss, we had like 20 archers traveling with us. And so you could do 20 d8 per round to you do your little defiled area and all your followers hit it, and then if your cleric also casts like heroism, like your war cleric or your paladin, that's another d4 of radiant. So that's 20 d8 and 20 d4 you're adding to this stuff. It really adds up if you have a bunch of followers, or if your army of squirrels you summon has a bunch of crossbows for some reason.
Yeah,
You know,
do the what pack tactics trick. Summon 8 cows. Turn them all corrupted.
Yeah.
Send them in.
I mean,
say ready their actions on different turns, and they'll all just trigger the D8 on their own.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's how you get around it, right? Is they usually all have the same turn, but if you ready their actions on different turns, then they can get the D8 still.
Yeah, that just reminded me of Diablo 2. It's just summon a bunch of corrupted cows. But yeah,
Plus Corpse Bomb.
Yeah, Corpse Bomb. Okay. Any final thoughts on the Blighted Druid? Any other things that stick out that people should be aware of?
This is the closest thing I've seen to like a proper plant druid. You know,
Yeah.
like someone who cares about plants more than they care about like beasts or stars or moons or things like that. I like it. I've been waiting for something like this, like zone control, summons, and it's handled in like a very respectful, like not crowding the battlefield sort of way. I enjoy it more than I enjoy a lot of their other attempts at summoners.
Yeah. I agree. It's based off the kit. You're going to be very active. You're going to have a lot of control in areas, especially with Defile Ground, which is going to be like your bread and butter feature. And then you just have all these other little caveats that just round out your druid kit. So you're not, unlike other druids, like I've said, you're not really going to be geared towards a very specific playstyle. You're going to be very utility driven, controlling area. And then as soon as you get into these higher levels, you're also going to be having pets and stuff to kind of help you and kind of round out your playstyle. But since you're also a druid, you have the flexibility of just controlling your area even more with your spell kit. So you had Defile Ground in one area, and then you can either stack it with another feature or control another patch of area with another spell, which I thought was actually really neat.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other notes for this one. I felt like it was on the cusp of really wowing me, but I kind of felt the opposite of what you two said. It wasn't the standout for me of these subclasses. It was kind of like middle of the line for me.
And we actually have one more feature. Actually, almost forgot. Incarnation of Corruption. This one gets lost because it's on the other thing. At 14th level, your physical form begins to take on the tainted traits of your land you are bonded to. Your skin grows ashen, your eyes darken or turn completely white. Spines and jagged spurs emerge from your body, granting you resistance to necrotic damage and a +2 to your AC. Additionally, when you start with your turn within a radius of corruption created by your Defile Ground feature, you can use a bonus action to gain temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. This reminds me a little bit too much of the Spore Druid, especially coming in really late. Nothing too exciting for a final feature.
Now, see, this is one of the things that makes me question what you said about Defile the Ground at the beginning.
Yeah.
Will the druid take an additional 1d8 for standing in their own Defile Ground?
Yeah.
That's what I wondered too. It's
Is that intentional?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a weird detail that probably one of those things like ask your DM. I don't think this is like a broken subclass if you limit it to enemies. So
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see an errata soon. Who knows?
Yeah.
Make it something. All right. Stephen Harris had a question early on that I wanted to save it until the end. We're going to bring it up right now. This is going to be more of a reflavoring, taking these and putting these classes into another setting. So his question is, which of these new subclasses do you feel most wants to leave Exandria and go elsewhere? So his examples were Juggernaut and Eberron, Blighted Druid and Faerun. Where would you want to take some of these subclasses and play them elsewhere?
I'd love to see some of them in a Ravenloft setting for sure. I kind of mentioned that before, especially these clerics. The Juggernaut almost feels like it could go anywhere to me. I'm trying to think if there was like a place it would shine, and if there's a place with lots of constructs, like maybe Eberron does have that, then yeah, anywhere where there's lots of constructs or just structures and objects to destroy, the Juggernaut wants to be there.
I got a few. I can go down my list. Mainly, these are going to be Magic the Gathering settings. Juggernaut easily can see this being Rakdos, Gruul, or Boros, depending on how you want to play it. So if Rakdos and Gruul are going to be along the same lines of you're going in there and causing chaos and havoc, and kind of just pushing everything around and destroying objects and buildings and stuff. You're kind of just wreaking havoc. If you're playing this with Boros, you can be kind of this frontline soldier that is part of the SWAT team. You're the guy that's going in there to kind of break the doors down and bust them so the rest of the team can go in and flood in. I can see that. But Juggernaut goes to Costco. No. And then what I'm seeing, the Bard is another one I could see going in College of Tragedy. For both, I could see this as a Rakdos character if you're going to play more into the theatrical aspects of the class or that guild in Ravnica. In Strixhaven, this also is good for Silverquill because you're playing with the duality of light and shadow. So this is one of those ones that hits the right notes, so you can play with that ideas using your words to inspire, but also to make somebody feel real bad about themselves and sad.
Yeah. Also, any campaign in the domains of dread would love the Tragedy Bard.
Yeah.
Anything on Van Richten's would be right at home.
Just imagining being in Curse of Strahd and making like everything you kill soliloquy about its death. Like take out Strahd and make him like soliloquy first instead of just being like,
oh, for sure, DM to have like a table of death words.
Yeah, it reminds me of an improv game I've played called Oscar-winning moment, where you're doing a scene and at any point the MC will say Oscar-winning moment, and like the spotlight goes on you, and you just have to play up whatever was happening in the scene as if it's your chance to win an Oscar.
Love
That's
that.
what the Tragedy Bard does.
All right, and then I'm looking at the Druid's Circle of Blighted for again in Ravnica. This is perfect with Golgari, 100%.
Is that the sewer stuff?
Yeah, they're the underground kind of like undead waste management guild. This fits perfect. This is probably a little bit better, I would say, than the Spore Druid. The only thing you're going to get different is the Spore Druid has the expanded spell list. But if you go Golgari and take the Golgari background in a Ravnica campaign, you kind of round that out anyway. And Circle Blighted fits perfectly with it. You can reflavor all your little pets as little saproling, corrupted undead minions. Just really, really sweet. And Witherbloom.
Yes, Witherbloom from Strixhaven.
Yeah.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. If there was ever a setting for for StarCraft, this is basically Zerg in a nutshell. I mean,
yeah,
pretty much pound for pound every single thing. Definitely played a little bit of that, probably.
You know, now that you say that, that makes me like it a little bit more. It's just like that's the Zerg creep. You're summoning little Zerglings, and
like as we say, flavor is free. Your shadow seeds can look like whatever you want. They're just plants.
You're the Zerg Druid. Now I like it even more.
Yeah. Hope you guys enjoy these subclasses. I think in general, regardless if you use them in your campaign or not, players are going to have fun with them. They're not I think my big overall opinion on at least this first half is that they do bring some exciting ideas, but they're not necessarily pushing the game in a way that WotC does on their own. I think the last subclasses from Tasha's, there's a lot of stuff that was released that pushed the game in a very, very high powered direction, or a little bit. Folks would feel that's not balanced. Not necessarily true, because balance only matters at your table, but overall in the ecosystem, how they need to design classes. That's where you're going to see different balances, and this doesn't necessarily push them in. I don't feel it pushes the envelope. Some of them feel a little too safe, I think.
Yeah. And honestly, that's fair. A lot of homebrew have to wrestle with the idea that they have to be accepted at as many tables as possible, right? So many homebrew kind of play it safe. They want to make sure that DMs are okay with what they do on the first pass through, and not necessarily being, scary OP homebrew as everything on D&D Wiki is,
Yeah.
And I was actually pleasantly surprised, because I really haven't touched even like the Blood Hunter. I don't pay attention. I the ones that I have paid attention are the ones from Wildmount, because it was an official book, even if it's a setting book. And so like Graviturgy was super underwhelming, and then Chronergy, Wizard, and Echo Knight were just like crazy.
Yeah.
And so
yes,
I really appreciate that it seems like these are more thoughtful, and they go against what I saw in all the forums about people complaining about the Tal'Dorei subclasses. I looked at them and I was like, why is everyone complaining? Like they're like, the Moon Cleric can concentrate on 2 spells, and I read it and I was like, only a few spells and it's Moonbeam. Like, so I was pleasantly surprised that I really like these subclasses, and they don't make my eyes cross when I try to think of how they break the game or something like that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. All right, I'm looking at the time. It's time to close up. We're going a little bit over. Again, thank you both for joining me. You can find details for both Jordan and Winter Wyvern in the description below. Anything else you guys want to say? Any shout outs? Anything you guys want to plug?
If you want a recap of any of these, I've got an article on flutesloot.com that I wrote for the Tal'Dorei subclasses. It's still on the homepage because I just put it out this week, so it's still like under the recent, really easy to find. So if you want to see all my notes and thoughts on it, go there. And I want to say Wintry Wyvern's channel is excellent. Seriously, if you haven't subscribed to him, like, just top-notch content. I wish you could do more content, Wintry Wyvern, but I'm sure you're busy.
Yeah, I've been wrestling with real life stuff. But yeah, I have a YouTube channel too. I've covered 3 of these. I haven't gone through the whole list because boy, life is busy. I also have a podcast that I have with a friend that I play D&D with called Your Rivers Are Wrong. We talk about world building and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Tune into that. Your rivers are wrong. If you ever have tried to make a map before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But
yeah.
That's it.
And thank you guys for both joining me. Please definitely go support the channels. They both do really, really great stuff. Last notes from me. I put out a video for the Circle of Blighted Druid, a character build, like I mentioned earlier. This one is specifically to help you play in a Call of the Netherdeep campaign. It'll put you right smack dab in the middle of the game to get you going. If you're looking for some either character ideas, or you just need a character to get into maybe a one shot or something for your Wildmount games, that you can do that. And also a little announcement. Let me pull it up. I don't believe it's up. Oh, okay, we got a black screen. Give me a sec. Let me pull this up for you guys.
Suspense.
Let's see. Okay, no, you guys are seeing the script. Here it is. Boom. Sorry, guys. Okay, I have an official subreddit now for the channel. So you can see it's a little barren. So people on the screen will be able to see it. It's a little barren right now, but just everything. My goal with this is also another way to build community and kind of be able to do stuff I can't really do on the YouTube side of the community page. So I'm probably going to be doing character build challenges weekly on here, because it's a lot easier to see them posted here than it is on the YouTube page. Also, question of the week and all that stuff is going to go in there. And I encourage you guys to join in, to post memes and whatever stuff you guys want to post on here. Just keep it friendly, keep it positive, and everything should be good to go. But yeah, there should be, it's r/Dungeoneers pack. You guys can go and check that out. And they also, I'll probably be doing weekly posts for my guest here, and then my other content creator friends, YouTuber friends, D&D friends, to post their content on there. So it can be like a small repository of like weekly D&D videos that you want to keep up with. Maybe there's other content creators you don't watch, and they can post their stuff there. And this one thread per week, I'm gonna probably set up for actually starting today. And so yeah, so that's pretty much it.
So it's a place I can post about my stuff without Redditors just saying they hate it.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty much. I want to have it like a weekly feed of like pretty much you or whatever. With posts, Eric, everybody that you guys have seen. And again, thank you. Next week, I don't know if we're going to do part 2 or go into Blood Hunter. I got to figure out some scheduling stuff. But yeah, Blood Hunter has been heavily requested, and I definitely want to jump into that. But again, thank you both for joining me this week, and I'll figure out. I don't know who's coming back for part 2, but we'll see. We'll see, or who's going to be in for Blood Hunter. But until then, you guys take care and have a good one.
Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.